I am Sarah Lancaster. I have been at K-State for just a little over a year now, and this evening we're going to talk a little bit about weed management in corn. So I have a couple of these slides through the presentation tonight, and I see now that I should have double-checked more carefully yesterday. If you guys are at a computer, so log into pollev.com. And then you'll need this backslash Sarah Lancast 648. And when you do that, you will be able to answer these questions. So if you guys could do that, you can log in and you could tell me, what pre-herbicides do you plan to use in your corn in 2021? And as you guys get logged in at that website, you will be able to answer the questions. So, are you going to get me some? All right. This will be helpful for you guys too, right? See what your neighbors are doing. There we go. So atrazine, Callisto. So the more folks that give the same answer, the larger the name of the herbicide is going to appear in this little word cloud. So we're seeing some things that aren't too surprising, right? Atrazine, Callisto, Degree. We'll give it just a few more seconds. So I'll have a couple more of these questions throughout the slideshow this evening. So as we go, you guys can just hop over there and answer. All right, I think we'll go ahead and cut this off. So I think we're seeing what's happening there. So I assumed atrazine was going to come up on that list. And I've got just a handful of product registration comments to share with you guys this morning before we look at some of the data from my efficacy trials this summer in Manhattan. And then just want to talk a little bit about how much weed control do you really need to aim for with your herbicide program. So the atrazine update, the EPA did release an interim decision in September of last year, but we're not through this re-registration process yet. We do still have a couple more assessments left to go. When I looked at the interim decision, a few of the changes that might affect you guys would be some restrictions on wind speeds during applications, some restrictions regarding buffers in endangered species habitats, and then some specific guidance for droplet sizes. So one of the things I've observed as I'm looking at new labels and label changes is that there is a lot more emphasis on limiting application practices to reduce off-target movement. We've gotten kind of used to talking about off-target movement in terms of watching dicamba drift, but EPA is really watching off-target movement in terms of protecting endangered species. And so that's going to be something I think we're going to see more of. A handful of other label updates here, a couple of them related to soybean, sunflower. The ones that I wanted to draw your attention to on this slide would be the update to Anthem Max, which would be extending the duration of time for which that herbicide can be applied post-emergent in soybeans, so from V3 to V6. And we're going to talk about why that is important here towards the end of the presentation. And then the last one that I wanted to draw to your attention, the last time I checked the database, which was earlier this week, the official label has not been approved yet, but BASF is planning to have a 2021 label that will extend application of Zidua through V8 in corn. So again, prolonging that time that we can use those overlapping residual herbicides. I'm assuming some of you folks are going to grow soybeans this summer as well. There are a couple of new brand names to look for soybean herbicides next year, although they're really just relabels of products that are already on the market. So Kyber is a new version of Fierce MTZ, same ratio of the active ingredients, And Panther MTZ is a new version of dimetric charged. And again, same active ingredients or same ratios of the actives. Sticking with the soybean theme, I do want to make sure everyone's aware of XtendFlex soybeans and just the fact that not also all Xtend soybeans are going to be XtendFlex soybeans. So folks are going to need to pay careful attention to records and communicate clearly with their custom applicators about if they have Xtend or XtendFlex soybeans this summer. And then the label updates there, you know, there were the application cutoff dates of June 30 for soybean and July 30 for cotton. There were the extended buffer requirements. And then the other thing that has been a little bit of a moving target here towards the end of this winter is the requirement for volatility reduction agents or pH buffers. So Bayer has taken the standpoint that they have licensed their product out to a variety of adjuvant manufacturers and distributors. So every talk I've given this winter, this grid has grown. So they're continuing to add more products and make more products available. BASF has gone with one product they're calling Centris. It will be applied at a lower application rate than the Bayer products. It is a little bit different technology there. Now, what you guys really want to hear about tonight, corn. So 2 new herbicide registrations for corn. One is called Impact Core, which is basically Impact plus Warrant. So it's a primazone plus acetochlor. And you can see it'll have a label through 11-inch corn and does require AMS and MSO for full activity. The other product on this list is Sinnate, which is Impact plus Liberty. So it can go on through V7 or 24-inch corn. And also you need AMS for the Liberty component there, plus a methylated seed oil or HSOC. So I did get to look at Sinnate this summer and wanted to share some of those data with you. So these data were collected 4 weeks after post applications of Sinnate. So this is going to be a post-emergent product. And some things to look at here. And we had Sinnate alone, Sinnate with atrazine, a 28-ounce rate of Sinnate, Impact and Liberty, so the 2 components of Sinnate separated out, and then Impact plus Roundup plus atrazine. Okay, so the Liberty and the Sinnate applications did quite well for us in terms of grass control, velvet leaf control. All of these treatments were a little weak on Palmer, which is obviously one of our big targets here is Palmer amaranth, and also a little weak on Morning Glory. But as part of this was a total post application there, the pre-herbicide, there was no pre-herbicide here. So this was a pretty tough situation to expect these herbicides to perform well. So that's what we saw. All right. So another question for you guys before we change gears a little bit. What are the 3 most problematic weeds in your corn crop? 3 most problematic weeds. Our friend the pigweeds. Water hemp. Oh, mare's tail. Cocklebur. You know, I've been hearing a lot of folks across the country talk about some of the, quote, old weeds making a comeback, and cocklebur is one of them that's been on a lot of discussions. Okay, excellent. All right, we will move on here. Kochia made the list. Okay, I do not have kochia at the research plots in Manhattan, but the 2 weeds that I wanted to pull out to look at this next set of data, I pulled out Palmer amaranth and Morning Glory. Okay, obviously Palmer amaranth is, you know, really our big target here with most of our weed management programs. So these treatments were 1-pass pre-emergence programs. Okay, so we've got 2 rating dates here, 4 and 8 weeks after planting for Palmer, and then 4 and 8 weeks after planting for Morning Glory. Okay, and we did have some differences in the Morning Glory control 8 weeks after planting for these treatments, but the Palmer control and the 4-week Morning Glory control were the same across all, statistically the same across all the treatments. okay? The black line going across the top there represents 95% control. So, one of the first things that jumps out at me about this graph is that when we're designing weed management programs to target Palmer amaranth, they're out there. We can do them. We can do that. However, I have some reservations that in our focus on Palmer, we might be missing a few other things. Okay, and so that's not to say that you should not focus on Palmer. That's to say that we just need to make sure that we're keeping these other weeds kind of in our priority or in the back of our mind as we're building our herbicide programs. Don't put all of the focus on Palmer. So, but generally good Palmer amaranth control there for those one-pass treatments across the board. So these are one-pass post-emergence treatments. And, really, oops, I apologize for that. A similar story there. There weren't any differences among those treatments for any of the application timings or any of the either of the weed species. But again, we're targeting Palmer and we're doing a good job controlling Palmer. However, we're leaving some things to be desired with Morning Glory. That larger seed, it's a little deeper in the soil, just a little more difficult to manage sometimes. And then these are the two-pass programs, right? Obviously, as a weed scientist, this is where I want to see folks is in these two-pass programs. I understand why you would want to go with something else. But this is where, when we think about herbicide resistance management and season-long weed control, this is where we need to be. And again, even among all of these programs, in general, the story is the same. We're doing a good job with Palmer amaranth control, almost across the board. There weren't any statistical differences among any of those treatments for Palmer amaranth control, all the way up to 8 weeks after planting. Where we did see some differences, though, was in the Morning Glory control. Okay, it was pretty variable and maybe less than desired. So this leads me to my last question for you guys. Is 95% control enough? So on all of those graphs, I had my little line drawn at 95% control, just as a marker there. So curious to see what folks think. And this is where I wish I had a live audience, because I would totally ask you guys some questions about this. All right, it looks like it's kind of evening out there. We've got a couple of absolutelys. We have most folks in the maybe, it depends on the situation. Yeah, I see the world as a gray. That's the answer I would have probably chosen. And C is never. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, is 95% control enough? So, as we think about these absolutely folks, sometimes I think if you're looking at in-season economics, that's where you're going to go, is absolutely. Would you say never, or when you might say never, is when we think about managing herbicide resistance, because every one of those weeds that escapes has an opportunity or has the possibility of being resistant to the herbicides that were used on that field. Maybe depends on the situation. Do you have herbicide resistance? Are you talking about a weed that is prone to developing herbicide resistance? And then the big thing I want to look at here is, are you talking about a weed that produces a lot of seeds that have the potential to live in the soil seed bank for an extended period of time? So these data are from Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas. I lived there for 4 years. There's some good people there. The environment is different, but these numbers, these are good data, and it gives us some things to talk about. Okay, so some of the weed scientists in Texas went and did basically a giant road trip across the state and surveyed the weeds that were escapes in cotton fields across the major production regions in Texas. Okay, so they went out looking to see what was there, and they recorded the top 5 species in each field. But they were specifically going after, they were expecting, right, to find a lot of Palmer amaranth and water hemp. So what did they find in terms of Palmer amaranth? They found on the low ends they found enough Palmer amaranth to produce over 300,000 seeds per acre on the low end, all the way up to almost 7 million seeds per acre, just from those escapes, okay? Those escapes represented anywhere from about 2 to 9% of the area of the field. Okay, so, if you put that into a percentage control, you're talking what, like 98 to 91% control, 91 to 98% control. Those plant numbers range from 130 to 748 plants per acre. So they had a range of results there, but the main story here is the amount of seed that they counted being sent back to those cotton fields. And one of the other things that's important about this, these data are pretty interesting. They collected Palmer amaranth seed from 7 states: Missouri, Arkansas, Wisconsin, Illinois, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Indiana. And then everybody traded seed. So they had all 7 collections in all 7 locations. Okay, and the thing I want to point out here, they looked at seed viability. So was the seed still able to germinate after it was left at the surface of the soil or 6 inches? Okay, so they collected seed 12, 24, 36 months after they buried it. Look at how much greater the life of those Palmer amaranth seed were when they were buried. Okay, so if you look, they were about 15% viability, so 85% of the seed were no longer viable after 12 months on the surface. About 5% after 24 months, and still about 5% after 36 months. Guys, this has implications when we hear conversations about let's break out the plow again because of the herbicide-resistant Palmer amaranth. That may not be as great a solution as we think, because what we're doing is we're turning over those seeds and actually allowing some of those seeds to live in the soil seed bank for a longer period of time. We all have to weigh pros and cons and figure out what's best for our own individual operations. But I think we need to have a long, hard look at if we want to go back to tillage before we do that, in terms of what is it really doing to the soil seed bank of these weeds that we're really trying to target. So, to answer the question, is 95% control enough? So these are using those numbers from the Texas study, from the 7 location study, and then a little bit of data from Kansas. Okay, so let's say on the high end, if you have 7 million seeds per acre, assuming a published rate of emergence and 95% weed control, so you have 5% escapes, that leaves us with 1.5 billion seeds that are 95% control sent back to the soil seed bank. Okay, so that's 95% control in a fairly tough environment, but I think we can all agree that adding 1.5 billion seeds to the soil seed bank is probably not going to be a good thing for us. So now let's look at kind of the best case scenario based on the data that I was able to pull from the literature. So let's say we have about 350,000 seeds. We're going to have a 20% emergence rate, 95% control. We're still going to end up with 250,000 seeds going back into the soil seed bank. So 95% control, we're making progress in terms of drawing down the reserve of seeds that are in the soil, but we're not making very fast progress. So I'm going to say no on that. Now, let's assume that these weeds are herbicide resistant. Okay, so same scenario. We've got the 7 million seeds, but this time we're going to assume a rate of 28% resistance. This number actually comes from some data that was recently published by some of the weed scientists at K-State, looking at a 6-way resistant Palmer amaranth population, guys, resistant to 6 different sites of action. So 28% of the survivors are resistant. That leaves us with almost 4 million seeds per acre that are not 100% guaranteed to be herbicide resistant, but every one of those 3.8 million seeds will have the possibility of being resistant to that particular herbicide. Same thing here. We're up to, again, over 1 billion seeds from that herbicide-resistant plant. So what then? If 95% control isn't enough, what do we need to think about? It's just good agronomics, but scouting after those post-emergent herbicide applications. So maybe you've gone with your 2-pass program, get back out there, have your consultant or get back out there and scout. Think about if you need a late post application, if that's possible. If it's a scattered problem and you have a few kids that need some punishment, I may or may not have been subjected to that. You can consider hand removal. Something else to think about would be some at-harvest weed seed control methods. We're actually going to look at some of those in some Kansas situations this summer, so we're excited about that. And then something else to think about would be to consider using cover crops in future years to help suppress weed seed germination. And I've got just a couple more slides here. This is some research that the Kansas Corn Commission funded. I have the privilege of serving on Melinda's thesis committee, and Melinda was looking at interactions among cover crop species, cover crop termination dates, and nitrogen applications, nitrogen rates. Okay, so this is kind of a busy chart. So you've got 2 different colors here. You've got an early termination timing in orange and an at planting termination timing in green. She had a cereal, which was rye. She had a mix. She had a no cover, and then she attempted to have some winter peas, but had a little snafu. So she called this her partial mix. So, one of the things you can see here is that these early termination timings, okay, had less cover crop biomass, obviously, and greater weed density. So we were getting some suppression, not control, but suppression. And then one of the things that she did is she went out near the end of the growing season and collected weed biomass again, right? So she's trying to measure those escapes. And so, most of the treatments had relatively few escapes. However, the 3 week before planting with no cover ended up with the greatest weed biomass at the end of the season. So a few announcements before I turn the program over to AJ this evening. I want to remind everyone that the 2021 Chemical Weed Control Guide is available. You can pick up a hard copy. Your county office or district office should have it, or feel free to reach out to me and we can figure out the best way to get you connected to one. It's also available for download online. And then the other thing, this has been kind of a fun project for me. I've started a podcast with a couple of my friends. So I invite you guys to look us up. We are on Google Podcast, we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify. And we've been having a really good time talking to a variety of weed scientists across the country, and just talking, in real terms about, what's going on in our war against weeds. So, for example, the episode we posted this week had a couple of folks talking about updates in terms of herbicide resistance. So I think you guys will enjoy that and learn some things from those podcasts. So please do give us a listen. And with that, I think we're going to take questions at the end of the evening, but I encourage or invite you guys all to reach out either through email or through social media. Thanks for listening this evening, and I look forward to answering questions at the end of the night.